Bruchim Abayim, we're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Hilchot Shabbat, Siman Rishnun, and we started Seif Bet. We started basically the concept of putting the food back and things that are not fully cooked, and you want to finish them on Shabbat. Now Seif Bet, Maran writes, En solin, batzal ubetza, o basar al gabe gechalim. This is continuation of the same concept the Gemara says explicitly, basically, in Daf Yud Chet, differentiating between different items that could be on fire in the pot or outside as you are roasting them on fire. And Shulchan Aruch says you cannot roast on fire batzal ubetza or basar, either onions or meat or eggs, al gabe gechalim, putting them on top of hot coals. You know, obviously you're talking about eggs when they're in their shells. Unless you have enough time before Shabbat that it's going to be roasted from all sides, but not fully roasted. It has to be only edible roasted. If it's already machal ben derosai, which is chatzi bishul, over here again Maran says is chatzi bishulo. We already spoke about the fact that Maran in the Machloket, Rashi and Rambam, in Yorede'ah versus Orach Chaim takes different sides. Over here he says chatzi bishulo, that machal ben derosai is half cooked. In the halachot of bishulakum, over there in Yorede'ah, Maran writes, Kuf Gimal, that it's shlish bishula. That's a third of the cooking is sufficient to be considered machal ben derosai. That if you cooked it machal ben derosai, even if the goy finished the job, still is fine, right? Or vice versa. Again, this is the way the Rosh explains it. We take all the kulot possible for a drabanan of bishulakum, as long as it is legitimate, and that by itself is the answer the Chacham Obadia and many others give, that Maran by Hilchot Shabbat, which we're talking about the Oraita level transgressions, is machmir, that you need more bishul from before Shabbat, so it is machmir by Bachal ben derosai. Over there Maran is more mekel, as we see. We even do tarti de satri kulas in the same halacha over there in Chod Bishulakum. So says Maran, so long as your food has been half cooked, which is machal ben derosai, afiluhu basar gidi, even if it is a softer, more tender and sensitive meat, still it is mutar. Once you put it on coals, what does that show? If you put it directly, you put a piece of meat directly on coals, what does that show exactly? That shows, says the Shulchan Aruch, the kevan shiniach al gechalim eino choshesh ela sheyisaleh me'era. You don't care about the quality necessarily. You want it to be even if it burns a little bit on the outside, you're putting it on charcoals, right? So certainly you don't care for the burning a little bit on the outside, but you just want it to be quickly done. It's the most intense heat when you put it mamash on gechalim, and therefore you want it to be saleh me'era v'afal pishit charich, even though that's going to be burnt a little bit on the outside. Therefore, if you're so in rush to get it cooked quickly, we are more concerned. So therefore, even with a basar gedi, even with a tender, soft, and sensitive meat, you still will have this issue of shema yechateh begechalim, which you wouldn't have it otherwise, but here you will have it. So says the Shulchan Aruch, aval keshenitzla k'machal ben derosai, but when it's already half cooked, lo chayshinan del ma'ati lechatuya. We're not concerned any longer that he's going to come to stoke it because it's already cooked and it's on intense heat, and it's edible. So then you're more calm. You just wait for it a little bit to finish up on its own. You're not going to be concerned to stoke the fire. Says the Shulchan Aruch, "Sheme'achar shu ra'ui la'achila, lama yachateh la'afsido." Why would you want to burn it more? It's already edible. It has intense heat beneath it, and therefore it's going to be good. If you stoke it and now you flame up the fire, it's going to burn it even more. It's already going to burn because it's sitting on top of the gechalim. So therefore, it's not in your advantage to stoke the fires. You're not going to do that. So says the Mishna Berura over here. Is it only basal, betza, ubasar? Like these are the examples that the Gemara gives. Are they davka or is it lav davka? Says the Chafetz Chaim v'uadin sha'arei dvarim she'en nechalim chayin u'chtel kameh. It's not just these three items, but it is really anything that is not edible, raw. Now, you'll right away ask, well, batzal, onions, they are nechal kshu chai, but at the same time, it's not so good to eat it raw, just like apples are. It's not geschmack. You cook it, it's much more easy to digest. That doesn't have, it takes the sharp taste out of it, and so on and so forth, and therefore it's still considered not fully edible raw. Now the Rambam also writes that the bitzalim are not healthy, which is I'm not sure if the health department nowadays agrees with that. The Rambam in Chodeot in Berdardanei has a list of items that are considered unhealthy. He has another list of very unhealthy, and the batzal is part of that as well. So says the Mishna Berura, al gabe gechalim hanu shnogim bagechalim. We're talking about they're mamash laying on top of the charcoals of the coals. They are on fire, literally. Now, Shulchan Aruch, earlier on in Siman Resh Nun Gimal, we had this towards the end of the long and complicated Seif Aleph, that you cannot put a kedera, you cannot put a pot of food on top of gechalim mamash. You remember that. Maran holds that's asur because it's considered hatmana b'miktat. It's considered semi-hatmana because you're burying the pot in the bottom and some of the sides in the gechalim, and that's going to be asur according to Maran. It becomes a whole question if he has source of heat on the bottom, if that's considered hatmana. When is it? When is it not? Is it in metal things that we have nowadays? This is the whole question of the crock pots that we discuss. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rabbi Yashiv and Hamabadia's Psak and so on, which encourage you to refer to back to that in the shiurim that we gave. But nevertheless, over here is not putting the food itself directly on a fire. That's not considered hatmara. Over there you have the walls of the pot that is covering the food, and now you have a source of heat on the bottom. So in combination of the two, you have a problem. But over here you have the tzli, the kebab on fire, you have the steak on fire. That's not considered an issue of hatmana whatsoever. It's just a side point that's important. Says the Chafetz Chaim, yamtin ad sheyichbu gechalim. You should wait until the gechalim are off, basically turn off, and then you could take them. In other words, once you are putting food on top of the gechalim on Erev Shabbat, going into Shabbat, how can you touch that on Shabbat? If you're going to cause them to turn off, right? You can't necessarily do that on Shabbat. Therefore, says the Chafetz Chaim, you have to wait for those coals to turn off, and only then you could take them, right? Now, well, there's more to discuss about this turning off the gechalim, but it's really like a side tangent that he brings out. There are other ways to make sure that you're not turning off the gechalim and you're not touching them, which becomes a little more complicated. But again, he's just saying be mindful that once you have meat on top of the gechalim, taking them could cause other halachic issues of kibui esh on Shabbat, which you have to reckon with as well. The reason, says the Chafetz Chaim, that we are concerned that you're going to come to stoke the coals, the fire, even with a tender meat of a lamb, as he explains himself, is because you already showed us that you don't care about the quality of this meat, how tender and juicy it's going to be. You're literally burning it by putting it on coals. I mean, who puts the things on coals? The whole outer side is going to be charcoal burnt, right? So you clearly don't care about that quality. Kvar nitpaer b'seif aleph. דעת המחבר דבבשר גדי ועוף שהוא רך לא חשינן כלל לחטויה. We're not concerned about stoking the fire according to Maran of Shulchan Aruch, because by the tender meat of lamb, because it's going to be ready by itself. It's not a tough thing to cook. So therefore, it becomes a question over here, why would it be a problem altogether? And the answer is because the reason that's mutar in Seif Aleph is you're not going to tamper with this meat, with the fire rather, when you have this meat, because flame is bad for the meat. It's going to burn it. So you want the heat without the flame. So you're not going to stoke the fire when you're making kebab out of lamb. But if you put it mamash on top of the coals, then of course you show that you don't care about that element of quality, and therefore we are concerned about it. Okay. Same thing is with other items that, when you put them there, even though that they are easy to cook otherwise, and you would not necessarily be concerned, but if you put it on top of the coals, you show that you don't care really about the details, so therefore you only want a quick turnaround, and therefore you would be still concerned about Shema Yahateh B'Gechalim, that maybe he's going to stoke the fire to do it even quicker. Ubifsar shor va'ez shu kashem, by tough meat of a larger animal that is harder to cook, says the Mishna Berura, there we need it to be completely roasted before we allow you. So therefore, if you're putting nice beef steak on top of the fire, on top of the coals, you have to have enough time before Shabbat that it will be not just machal ben derosai, but it will be nitzle kol sorko. It will be fully done the way you want it. Mibod yom davka, before Shabbat. Still we will be concerned about stoking the fire, even if it is machal ben derosai, half of its cooking still will be an issue, says the Chafetz Chaim. Fine. Says the Mishna Berura, דאילה והכי חשנה לחיטוי כי לא ייפסד על ידי חיטוי כיוון שהוא אינו מונח על גבי גחלים. He's talking about I apologize, I skipped a line over here which is actually consequential. I'm going to go back to it. ומותר לתרו בסמוך לחשיכה אפילו אם לא יהיה נצלה מבעוד יום כמאכל בן דרוסאי. It's מותר to put it right before sundown, even though that's not going to be fully roasted on fire, מבעוד יום, כמאכל בן דרוסאי. והוא הדין בצל וביצה. And same halacha would be with batzal ubetza for eggs and for onions. That's going to be like that. But basar shor va'ez shu kashe, ba'inan she'en nisle kol sorko. We need it to be fully roasted. Mi be'od yom. De'ilav hachi chashinan lechitui. Because otherwise we're going to be concerned for chitui because it's not put directly on the gechalim. V'da'at harama, that's maran. V'da'at harama ka'poskim de'en chiluk. According to the Rama, there is no difference. Whether you put it on top of the coals or you put it next to them is going to be no difference. Ben bebasar shor or basar gedi ve'of, hashiur she'itzaleh mi be'od yom kemachal ben drosai. The shiur would be half of its cooking, and when it's half cooked before Shabbat, we will allow you to do it because we're no longer concerned about no longer concerned about chitui begechalim. So Maran holds that if it's not on gechalim, it needs to be actually fully nitzla. If it's not on gechalim, you're doing roasting, fire roast the kebab on fire, but not placing the meat on top of gechalim. Needs to be fully cooked if it's basar shor. But if you put it on the coals, then that would be fine. That's the difference, that one line. But according to the Rama, it doesn't make a difference. If you put it on the gechalim, you put it off the gechalim, it's still going to be the same shiur of machal ben derosai, that if you already got to machal ben derosai, we're not concerned really about chitui. Mashenkin by Maran, by basar shor, if it's not placed on top of the gechalim, you would require it to be fully cooked the way you want it before Shabbat. Says the Mishna Berura. If it's inside the tanur that is sealed off, and you put clay on top to completely seal it and lock it, then shari ledide bechol gavni letoch liteno samuch lechashecha. Then, in any case, it will be mutar, according to the Rama, to put it right before Shabbat. We're not concerned. He's going to open the seal to stoke the fire. And Maran writes already in Seif Aleph that the minhag is like the second svara, so therefore we have that leniency as well. Now, the Shulchan Aruch said that even if this is a tender, soft meat, it's going to be still problem because you put it on top of the coals, showing that you don't care about burning outside of it. So therefore, we're back to square one of chashash, of concern of stoking the fire. Hainu afiduhu menutach, even if it is cut to pieces. In other words, this before sundown, for this meat to become at least machal ben derosai, you put this on, and now on Shabbat became ready, well done. That is asur to eat. Says the Chafetz Chaim, avar shenatan b'mezid samuch lechashcha kol kach, ad shelo haya shehud litzlot mibod yom k'machal ben derosai. If you didn't have the chance to cook this half of its cooking before sundown, then it's going to be asur, because it was basically roasted on Shabbat in a way that was not allowed. Or you forgot it, right? You conveniently forgot it, and it became etzli b'Shabbat. Still, even though that you forgot it and it was not a transgression, a deliberate transgression, still would be asur even b'di'evet, because we want to make sure it's a knas that people should not be leaving b'mezid and say that I forgot. So in other words, even though that technically speaking, if you forgot it should be mutar, we still don't allow you to eat it, because next thing you know, people are going to put it there and say, oh, I forgot it. So therefore, we just across the board don't let a meat that was roasted on Shabbat to be eaten. Says the... Now, by the way, even on a gezerah darabanan, you see from here that we make a knas, they should not eat it, right? Because this whole thing is a gezerah darabanan of shema yechateh. You ended up not stoking the fire, of course, right? Why can't you put it from before Shabbat going into Shabbat to become etzli? Why? Shema yechateh bekechalim. Because maybe you're going to come to do a isur. It itself is not asur. You didn't do anything Yisur. On Shabbat, you did nothing on Shabbat. You left something before Shabbat to happen by itself, which includes a gezerah of maybe you're going to come to do an Isur. But you didn't. You forgot it there, shogeg, and now it became kabab and the fire went off. You know, kol beseder. Why can't I eat it? You see from here, yesod, that even on a gezerah rabbanan, if you transgressed it, even b'shogeg, it's still b'di'evet is asur to eat it, right? It's the maximum amount of knas that you could have is on a gezerah rabbanan, b'shogeg, even b'di'evet, and yet we still don't let this happen. That would be the chidush of this part, as Rabbi